Hey guys, welcome to the channel, and what we are going to talk about today is a slightly long-term review of the LG G2, which is last year's flagship OLED TV from LG. So just to put things into perspective, this year's flagship TV is the LG G3, and as of making this video on online retail stores, the G3 55-inch is priced at about 2,30,000 rupees, whereas the G2 from last year is priced closer to 1,30,000 rupees. So that's a whopping 1 lakh rupee difference in the price that's available online. I'm sure if you go offline, you are going to get these TVs at a much lower price point because you can, of course, bargain, and I believe festive sales are just around the corner. But having said that, there is a stark difference in the price of these two TVs, at least as what we can see online right now. And there are, of course, a few reasons for that. The G3 comes with not only a heat sink, but also MLA, which is a micro lens array that essentially helps the TV get really bright. It is in fact one of the brightest OLED TVs you can buy. And these are technologies that are not there in the C3, which I believe is one of the more popular TVs, especially when it's price to OLED ratio, especially if you're someone that's looking for a flagship TV. Now, in the past, if you had, let's say, the C9 and the G9, or the C10 and the G10, or the C1 and the G1, what you were getting is more aesthetic improvements and slight improvements in performance. The improvements in performance wasn't very vast between the C and the G series up till the C1 and the G1 when you looked at LG's OLED lineup. But that all changed with the C2 and the G2, because the G2 was one of the first OLED TVs to come with a heatsink at the back. What does the heatsink do? It helps the TV get much brighter, and if you have, let's say, a bright image on screen and then immediately you change it to a dark image, sometimes on an OLED TV you may notice a little bit of image retention, and for that image to go away it can take a couple of seconds. You don't notice this when you're watching regular TV, but let's say switch to a completely bright white image for a couple of seconds, for 10-20 seconds, and then switch to completely black, and you will notice some image retention. So the heatsink not only helped the TV get brighter, but it also helped reduce the time it took for this image to go away, and that is the big distinguishing feature between the G2 and the C2. And what's the big distinguishing feature this year between the G3 and the C3? Well, the G3, in addition to the heatsink, also has MLA, which is micro lens array technology, which basically means that the TV can get a lot brighter when compared to the C3, and also because of the heat sink, that image retention problem goes away almost instantaneously, and it also helps the TV give you a much brighter image. So last year and this year we've noticed that there is a pretty big difference if you go for the C series or the G series in LG's OLED lineup. So last year I went in for the G2, got it at a pretty reasonable price. It's been about 10 months, and I can tell you that this is the TV of choice for everyone at home to consume content on, simply because in a matter of 10 months we've consumed 1,120 hours of content as a family on this TV. Let's translate that into how much it is per month. That's 112 hours of content consumption on the LG G2 per month, which translates to little more than 3.5 hours of content consumed per day. Now, it's not like someone watches TV every day, unless they do when I go to office. But yes, this TV is being consumed way more than the B9 that I reviewed earlier, which was the first high-end TV that came into my house. So needless to say that the G2 is a TV that everyone loves, and we are going to get into a lot of details about this TV. You can check the timestamps in the description below. But before we get into it, a couple of tips. You want to keep the OLED backlighting at about 100. You want to keep the peak brightness at high. You want to switch off true motion and any form of motion smoothing. And you also want to switch off smooth gradation. What smooth gradation and true motion do is, I think they bring down the overall brightness of the TV, especially if you're consuming content in a brightly lit room. If you want to know how to switch off these settings on the LG TV UI, be it for older models or the newer models, I have a video which I will link in the description below, or you can go and check it out on the channel. So with that out of the way, let's start with the picture performance. Now, this TV supports 4K resolution with HDR10 and Dolby Vision, and it also supports Dolby Atmos. And the design is such that the TV really fits flush on the wall, so it does justify the gallery series. And as you can see, when it sits flush on the wall, it has this really small bracket that holds it in place, which surprisingly is not only quite sturdy, but it's quite easy to pull the TV in front and push it back to get to the connectivity options, which are for full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports for gaming, which is also something that we're going to get to. So let's start with the absolute most important thing, which is the picture quality. And if you're someone that's going to consume content in standard dynamic range, which could be in standard definition, it could be in high definition, which is 1080p, or even in 4K, and I can tell you that the picture performance of this TV is absolutely sublime. Let's take a movie like Mission Impossible, where you have this nice motorcycle and car chase sequence that's happening, and you can see that the skin tones look natural, the deserts look natural, the roads look like they should, and the preset that I used for this was either Cinema or Cinema Home. Now with these two presets, the biggest difference natively is that one is slightly cooler and one is slightly warmer, and I would recommend choosing any of these two settings, whichever is pleasing to your eye to consume movies, especially in SDR, simply because on standard and vivid, I think they look too cool, and in vivid the colors look way too punchy. So Cinema and Cinema Home are the presets for any form of standard definition content you want to watch. Even a show like Young Sheldon, which is kind of a good example of all the TV shows that you would watch generally, it has a fairly nice color palette to it, which looks really vibrant in the vivid preset, in case that's something you like. But I still kept it on Cinema Home, and put the OLED backlighting to 100%, which is different from brightness. And because the backlighting was high, it gave me a pretty rich experience. Now the one thing to notice is that despite this TV getting pretty bright, in a well-lit room you will still see reflections on the TV, so it is advised that you probably draw a curtain here or there, or control the light in the room to have the best experience, because the best experience from this TV comes when you are watching movies, especially if it's an HDR or Dolby Vision. Now something like Our Planet, where you have such beautiful colors on screen, looks absolutely sublime in Dolby Vision. Of course, even in Dolby Vision on this TV, I kept it on the Cinema preset, which supports Dolby Vision. Now a lot of other Android TVs, for example, will have settings like Dolby Vision Bright, Dolby Vision Dark for a bright room and a light room, but out here I kept it on Dolby Vision in Cinema mode for HDR10, 10 plus, which TV may not support, and of course Dolby Vision content as well. So needless to say that for any HDR content you should leave it at that. Now my only problem with this TV is that the filmmaker mode in a well lit room made the content look really dark, and it's like almost a 10% difference between watching it in filmmaker mode and a regular Cinema mode, which could be in Dolby Vision or HDR. So I would highly recommend you use filmmaker mode only if you're consuming content in a really dark room, like a pitch dark room for movie night, because it is going to try to replicate the creator's intent and bring certain settings down. I kept filmmaker mode off for most of the times when I consume content on this TV. So needless to say, I mean, even in a show like Grand Tour, where you have these cars whizzing around the desert, or a show like Jack Ryan, where you have the details in a darkly lit conversation in the room, or even if you're watching a movie like Ready Player One, which just has so many vibrant colors all over the space, I can tell you that this TV is outstanding. Now a movie like Wonder Woman, which is mastered to show beautiful HDR content, also looks sublime, especially the fight at the end where you have lightning which just makes the entire screen bright, to the fire in the background where the two characters are fighting in the front. It is just an absolutely immersive experience. Even the color accuracy of the presets out of the box is very good, to the point where I only changed some of the settings, which I'm linking to that video in the description below, where I'm going to tell you the settings that I change when I get an LG TV for either the old WebOS or the new WebOS. You should definitely go and check that out. And of course, put OLED backlighting to 100%, which is by default in HDR. So if you're someone that's looking to have a great cinematic experience, a great flagship TV, then yes, this is definitely one to consider. Now moving over to gaming, this TV supports a 120 Hz refresh rate, all forms of VRR, be it G-Sync or AMD's FreeSync. It supports all the formats. It's great for PC gamers. I unfortunately am a console gamer, so for those of you that want some PS5 and Xbox analysis, that's what we have here. So let's start with the PS5. Once you connect it, you do have to, of course, configure the brightness to calibrate it for HDR, something that happens automatically on a lot of Sony TVs. But out here, we do it manually, and you can see a game like Dirt 5, which is an HGIG game. Now, I've seen on a lot of budget TVs, they let you calibrate the TV and the console to a higher range of HDR. But when you play a game like Dirt 5, it looks really, really burnt out because the TV doesn't have that levels of peak brightness or that kind of a contrast ratio. But out here, as you can see in a game like Dirt 5, it looks absolutely perfect like it should. And since the TV supports 120 Hz and VRR, you can see that we do get 120 Hz on this TV. The reason that the frame rate on a game like Uncharted, I've gone and changed the settings a bunch of times and it still shows you as 120 Hz even if you're playing it in the performance mode where it should show you 60 Hz, is that the VRR numbers actually kick in and change when the game is actually using VRR. So Uncharted as a game is locked to 60 FPS when you're playing in performance mode, and it is locked to 120 Hz when you are playing in 120 Hz mode. That's why you don't see that VRR number move much. But when you move to a game like God of War or even Spider-Man, which obviously looks sublime. I mean, when you're swinging across the city as Spider-Man, the blacks in his suit, the red accents, his lightning abilities, even the sun raining down into the city is just absolutely gorgeous and supremely immersive. But you can notice that the VRR counter in both these games is actually showing you the frame rate, and that's because these games do support the variable refresh rate, and hence that's visible on the settings of this TV. Even when you move over to the Xbox, for example, it does support Dolby Vision gaming at 120 Hz as well. In fact, it was one of the first TVs that only supported 4K at 120 Hz in Dolby Vision when the competition did not support it at that time. So if you got the G2, then you were future-proofing yourself for Dolby Vision gaming. Now, we played games like Forza and Gears 5 on the G2, and once again, I can tell you that the frame rate, of course, was locked and stock solid at 60, and the gameplay experience was absolutely phenomenal. Even a game like Doom Eternal, which has like a ray tracing mode for lower frame rate or 120 Hz mode on this TV, just felt so smooth. The input lag was almost negligible, and the audio output from this TV was also really, really good. I mean, you do miss the bangs and thuds of a bass at some point, especially when you're firing a nice shotgun in Doom. But the overall sound output from this TV is also very, very premium considering the price that you're paying for it. So moving over to audio, the sound quality from this TV is good. You have good dialogue clarity, you have good music clarity. Even in mixed audio sequences where there's some action happening and people are talking, you can actually hear them quite clearly. And like I said, the only thing I miss is like a deep and thumpy bass, which kicks in when you have a really nice soundbar like the Yamaha YS209 that I have. You can go on the channel and check out that review as well if you like. It's a long-term review of my soundbar. But yeah, I mean, even without a soundbar, if I'm consuming content on another TV with my soundbar setup, on this TV you can still enjoy a great movie watching experience. And the fact that it comes with all 4 HDMI 2.1 ports means that you're future-proofed if you have a PS5, a Series X, an NVIDIA 40 series GPU, and the new Apple TV 4K. All of these devices support HDMI 2.1 and you're good to go with all the 4 ports. Of course, one of the ports on the TV supports eARC in case you want to connect a Dolby Atmos home theater. Now, coming to the user interface, this is slightly different from what LG had a few years ago. Rather than having the cards set up at the bottom like it did on the B9 or the C9 or the C10, it kind of has a full screen layout right now, which kind of covers the entire screen. For some reason, the top half of the screen in India doesn't have much on it. The apps are still at the bottom. I missed the slight pop-up that comes when you scroll over apps in the old UI where you actually got to see some content, but out here you can navigate the apps quite easily. And the UI is butter smooth. I mean, in these past 10 months, I haven't noticed it lag. And when I use the B9 and then the G2 back to back, you can actually feel how laggy the B9 has become compared to the G2. That's not to say that the B9 is laggy. It's just that the G2 is just so much swifter when it comes to switching on apps or switching between apps or simply just coming on and off as a TV. When it comes to the remote control, I actually still prefer the old remote control on the B9 simply because it has a play and pause dedicated button. Out here you need to use the wheel itself to play and pause. The wheel is slightly more depressed in its positioning, and that's good because it's easy to find without actually looking at the remote, and it's easy to control the navigation buttons and the wheel in its current situation. And the remote control now has a slightly more squarer UI with more OTT shortcuts, dedicatedly there. However, if you're someone that was a power user of the older TV remotes, you know that you could map your favorite apps to some of the buttons on the remote. So that's kind of a personal choice, but I do miss the dedicated play and pause buttons on the remote control. So overall, I think last year was the time when LG probably realized that, yep, flagship technology goes in the G series and the C series is for those that want a fantastic OLED experience. Of course, I do feel that these technologies are going to start trickling down into, LG's more other OLED lineups, like what you want to see in the G series in 2023 with MLA probably may come to the C series next year, but that's just me speculating. But yes, if you want absolute flagship performance, you are going to spend that little extra on the G series now from LG. However, having checked out a lot of the C series TVs on their OLED lineup over the years, I can tell you that going with a C10 or a B or a C1 or a C2 or even the C3 right now, you aren't going to be making a mistake. But yes, the Gallery series needs to be wall mounted to actually be experienced. But if you're someone that's going to tabletop the TV, then you may want to consider your options. So there you have it, guys. That was my long-term review of the LG G2. How did you like the video? You can let me know in the comment section below. And for more from the world of televisions and home entertainment, you can subscribe to the channel. We will catch you in another video. It's goodbye for now.